साथ ही मेरे आंदोलन
Before I start coming to the subject, मेरा दायित्व बनता है कि कुछ अपने पूर्व के स्पीकरों के बारे में कुछ प्रकाश डालूं। मुझे बहुत ही अच्छा लगा कि आज मुझे मौका दिया गया इस आयोजन में शरीक होने का। इसका श्रेय चांसलर शाह जी को है, विनोद जी को है और डॉक्टर पंकज सोनी जी को है, जिनके आग्रह पर मैं आज यहाँ हूँ। शाह जी जो चांसलर हैं, इनका बहुत जोशीला भाषण हुआ, बहुत दम है आपकी बातों में, और मैं यही चाहूँगा कि इस दमखम को बरकरार रखें और अपने इंस्टीट्यूशन को ऊंचाइयों तक ले जाएं। एक साधारण सा शेर है, तबीयत से एक पत्थर उछालो यारो, आसमां में भी सुराग हो सकता। तो शाह जी ने आसमान में सुराग करके दिखाया कि कैसे नीचे स्तर से भी ऊपर की ओर जाया जा सकता है। आदमी में विल पावर होनी चाहिए, कुछ भी असंभव नहीं है। डॉक्टर पंकज सोनी जी ने बहुत कुछ बताया आप लोगों को। विनोद जी जो झारखंड उच्च न्यायालय के अधिवक्ता है, पूर्व में पुलिस पदाधिकारी रहे हैं, झारखंड के रग रग से वाकिफ हैं। यहाँ की जो वाइस चांसलर हैं डॉक्टर रश्मि, इंस्टीट्यूशन में वाइस चांसलर का बहुत योगदान होता है। चांसलर बच्चों से उतना जुड़ते नहीं हैं जितना वाइस चांसलर जुड़ते हैं। तो जैसा कि शाह जी ने पूर्व में कहा, मैं विषय प्रकाश पर तो बाद में आऊँगा। सबसे बड़ी चीज़ है विश्वविद्यालय के प्रांगण में अनुशासन। इस विश्वविद्यालय का नाम है राधा गोविंद। राधा गोविंद का पर्यायवाची होता है श्री कृष्ण। श्री कृष्ण को जब हम जानते हैं तो गीता से ताल्लुकात होती है, और गीता का जो सार है, पूरी गीता पढ़ लें आप, गीता का जो सार है वह अनुशासन है। तो आपके विश्वविद्यालय का नाम राधा गोविंद है, तो यहाँ के हर विद्यार्थी या फैकल्टीज़ या जो लोग भी जुड़े हुए हैं, उनको अनुशासित रहना उनकी बाध्यता है, जो प्रतीक है आपके विश्वविद्यालय का। नाउ कमिंग टू द सब्जेक्ट, ऑनरेबल चांसलर, वाइस चांसलर, respected dignitaries, esteemed academicians and honored guests, media persons, it's really an honor for me to be a part of this august gathering. I rise today with a sense of solemn responsibility, mindful of the dignity of the office I hold and the constitutional trust reposed in every judge of the Republic. The subject before us, the concept widely discussed under the phrase, one nation, one election, is not a matter of mere political organization or administrative convenience. It is a question that penetrates deep into the foundational architect of our Constitution. It touches upon our understanding of federalism, our practice of parliamentary democracy, our conception of electoral accountability, and our fidelity to the basic structure that has guided the growth of our republic for more than 7 decades. It is only befitting that before discussing any aspect of synchronizing elections, we reaffirm a basic truth that Constitution of India is not a machine to be tuned for efficiency alone. It is a moral and political charter framed after profound deliberation, intend to ensure that power is exercised with restraint, the governance remains accountable, and that the diversity of our nation is reflected in every institutional arrangement. The framers of the prospects and challenges of such an electoral transformation. The following rationales are drawn from the report of the High-Level Committee on simultaneous elections chaired by former President Sri Ramnath Kovindji. What it talked about, it promotes consistency in governance. Frequent elections divert leaders and governments from governance to constant campaigning. Simultaneous elections would allow greater focus on development and welfare-oriented policy making. So first we will have to understand that what is this one nation, one election? Whether it is our in favor, whether it is against us, whether it is going to be imposed on us, first we have to dilute it and we have to see that what are the merits and the demerits of this report, which was headed by our ex-President Ramnath Kovindji. Second one is, it prevents policy paralysis. The repeated enforcement of the Model Code of Conduct disrupts administrative work and slows down welfare schemes. Holding elections together would reduce these interruptions and ensure smoother governance. So we are talking about the demerits. Mitigates resource diversion. Election require large-scale deployment of personnel affecting routine government work. A single synchronized selection would limit such diversion and allow officials to concentrate on their core duties. You must have seen, visiting several offices at the time of election, what is said? Election duty mein gaye hain. Pura ka pura mahkama, where they are? On election duty. Whether IAS officers, IPS officers, public servants, all preserves regional party relevance. Simultaneous elections do not diminish the role of regional parties. We are afraid, the political leaders of the regional parties are afraid that the one election, one nation will diminish the role of regional parties. It is not that. They strengthen the space of regional issues by preventing them from being overshadowed by national campaigns. Enhances political opportunities. A unified election cycle ensures a more balanced distribution of responsibilities within political parties, creating space for more leaders and reducing domination by a few. Improves governance focus. With fewer election cycles, political parties can devote more time to governance and public service rather than perpetual campaigning. Reduces financial burden. Finance is a very important role which has to play. Now we say that it reduces financial burden. How it reduces? Conducting all elections together would significantly cut costs related to manpower, logistics, and security, enabling more efficient use of public funds and better फिजिकल मैनेजमेंट. कंपनियां आती हैं ना, 20 कंपनियां आ रही हैं, सीआरपीएफ की, बीएसएफ की, कहाँ से पूरा देश डिस्टर्ब रहता है. If there is one election in a particular state, the entire country is involved in it. So these are the reasons. In this sense, the committee asserted that synchronized elections might not only enhance administrative coherence but also contribute to physical prudence and long-term economic planning. This legislative initiative forces us as custodians of the constitutional conscience to reflect deeply upon several questions. In our mind, several questions are coming. Several issues are arising. What are those issues? What does it mean to synchronize elections in a federal republic? Would such synchronization enhance democracy? Or might it dilute the federal voice of individual states? Would it strengthen parliamentary accountability? Or would it restrain the people's power to replace government midterm? Does the proposed amendment preserve the basic structure of the Constitution? Or does it risk altering the essential character of federalism and parliamentary democracy? And perhaps more importantly, does synchronizing elections uplift the democratic experience of the citizen, or does it risk compressing the complexity of Indian democracy into a uniform frame? To explore these questions, meaning thereby to decipher the hidden facts about this 129th amendments, we must first recognize that elections in India carry a significance unmatched in most democracies. Our elections are not merely procedural exercises. They are affirmations of the sovereignty of the people. They are the moments when the citizen steps forth with full constitutional dignity and asserts the collective will. In a country as vast, as varied as ours, elections are the mechanism through which voices from the hills, the deserts, the forest, the coast, the plains, and the cities converge in democratic harmony. The frequency of election is not an irritant to governance, it is the rhythm of democratic life. I'll just pause for a moment. The boys, the students sitting over there, the faculties, you must have watched TV at the time of elections. What is seen there? रेगिस्तान में दिखाया जाता है कि वहाँ पे भी लोग दौड़े आते हैं. सियाचिन ग्लेशियर में दिखाया जाता है कि लोग दौड़े आते हैं. पहाड़ों में लोग दौड़े आते हैं. दूर सुदूर गांव में लोग दौड़े आते हैं. What it shows, what is the meaning behind it, what is the message given behind it? Unity in diversity. अनेकता में एकता है। इलेक्शन महज एक एक्सरसाइज नहीं है लेजिस्लेशंस और पार्लियामेंटियंस को चुनने का। इट इज आवर रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी लाइंग ऑन आवर सोल्जर दैट वी आर डूइंग अ वेरी पायस जॉब which has the result for 5 years. So this we have to know, this we have to make understand each and every people. What Mr. Shah says, अपने माता पिता को भी समझाओ. It was also Mr. Soni that you can educate your parents also. Mr. Shah also focused on that. So we have to take it very seriously and understand the minute detail of this amendment, which says that our Constitution, in several lead judgments pronounced by the Supreme Court, Keshwanand Bharti and much more, that make amendments. You have the 2/3 majority parliament, you can make amendments. But you have to see, you have to be cautious that the basic structure of the Constitution is not changed. And we have to act like प्रहरी. सीमा पे जैसे तैनात रहते हैं ना प्रहरी अपने देश की रक्षा के लिए, तो we all are प्रहरी of the Constitution. Particularly the advocates, the judges, the law students. That basic structure of the Constitution is not changed. Proponents of synchronized elections emphasize the administrative burden of repeated polls. The point to the deployment of security forces, the diversion of administrative machinery, the recurring model code of conduct, restrictions on government announcements, and the financial cost associated with frequent electoral cycles. These concerns are valid and deserving of thoughtful consideration. Elections are indeed monumental undertakings, and the Election Commission of India must shoulder immense responsibility. Yet administrative convenience, however compelling, cannot distinguish the deeper constitutional principles at stake. The Constitution was not designed primarily for convenience, it was designed to ensure legitimacy. Let us examine federalism, because the question arises that if there is amendment, if that is allowed, the federal part of the Constitution will be affected. Our Constitution talks of federalism. So let us see whether federalism of the country is affected or not. In S.R. Bommai case, it is for the law students, the faculties must be remembering a lead case, S.R. Bommai case versus Union of India. The Supreme Court held that federalism is part of the Constitution's basic structure. Noting that democracy and federalism are essential features and that Article 356 must be interpreted to preserve, not undermine them. States under our Constitution are not mere administrative units. We'll be talking about the powers of the state. They are constitutional entities with distinct identities, distinct leadership, and distinct political rhythms. State elections enable citizens to express regional aspirations, evaluate local leadership, and respond to local needs. A farmer in Punjab may be preoccupied with agriculture procurement. A family in Kerala with healthcare infrastructure, with agriculture procurement, of a community in the Northeast with cultural rights and connectivity, a citizen in Jharkhand with issues relating to land, mining and forest. These are the main issues in our state. When voter casts ballots in state elections, local concerns dominate their mind. At the time of elections, what we see, what we want to be decided is our burning issues of the state, not of the country. Here, nobody is going to decide the home policy of the state, but we want to decide that how the land policies will prevail in this state. What about the mining reforms and others? If both processes are combined, one election and one nation, the voters' differentiated evaluation risk becoming blurred. The Supreme Court in S.R. Bommai held that central government cannot invoke Article 356 merely because a different party with a different ideology comes to power at the center. It must be shown that the state government's ideology is actually inconsistent with the Constitution and prevents it from functioning in accordance with constitutional provision. Just I want to explain, merely because यहाँ पे किसका राज्य चल रहा है, झामुमो का, झारखंड मुक्ति मोर्चा, हेमंत सोरेन एज अ चीफ मिनिस्टर, और सेंट्रल में मोदी जी एज अ प्राइम मिनिस्टर who is heading the Bharatiya Janata Party. Merely because there is a difference in ideology, political ideology, the government cannot be toppled down. The state governments are always in fear. Central government 356 का उपयोग करके they will topple down the government. The state doesn't have this power. Let me say in loud words, the central government doesn't have the powers merely because there is a change of government, you topple down the government. No. And this was held in B.R. S.R. Bommai case. So they cannot go against the Supreme Court verdict. So one should know it. आम आदमी को ये जानने की जरूरत है, and therefore this seminar must have been organized by Mr. Chancellor. इसकी जरूरत इसीलिए ना महसूस की आप. Political scientists, both in India and abroad, have recognized a phenomenon known as national wave dominance, where simultaneous elections tend to subordinate local issues to national themes. This raises a legitimate concern. Again, the same. Will synchronization diminish the independent voice of state electorates? Will regional leadership be overshadowed by national political narratives? These are not rhetorical queries, but are constitutional matters requiring sincere reflection. So before passing the bill, before amendment coming, these issues should have to be answered in the parliament. It has to be interpreted. It has to be decided. It has to be brought to the notice that yes, the things which are coming in the mind of the electorals have to be met with. They have to be answered in true sense. So their rights are not diminished. The 24th Amendment Bill seeks to preserve federal accountability by introducing truncated terms for mid-term legislatures, yet this creates a paradox. Suppose a state assembly is dissolved. I'm just giving an example. Suppose a state assembly is dissolved prematurely and the electors choose a new government with overwhelming enthusiasm. Under the proposed model, that new government would serve only the remainder of the synchronized term, perhaps 2 years, perhaps even less. What does this imply? It implies that the sovereign decision of the electoral is being subordinate to a national calendar. It implies that the democratic mandate is being constrained by a structural schedule. This is constitutionally significant. Furthermore, parliamentary democracy thrives on the principle of collective responsibility. Under Article 75 and 164, governments remain in office only as long as they command the confidence of the legislatures. If that confidence evaporates, अगर वो confidence उड़ गया, खत्म हो गया, the government must fall. This is not a flaw, rather is the very essence of accountability. The government must fall. This is not a flaw, rather is the very essence of accountability. But synchronized elections require stability over flexibility. They require governments to complete fixed terms even when the political legitimacy supporting them has collapsed. Hence arises the suggestion, which is popular among some scholars, that is of instituting a constructive vote of no confidence. Under this model, a government cannot be removed unless an alternative majority simultaneously presents itself. Germany uses this system. Spain uses it, but India does not. And the framers rejected its rigidity deliberately. Introducing such a mechanism in India would require recalibrating the core balance of parliamentary democracy. It would limit legislative dissent. It could diminish the freedom of elected representatives to challenge executive authority. It would weaken the dynamism of coalition politics, which has enriched India's democracy in several phases of our history. The Supreme Court, in the aforesaid case, that is S.R. Bommai, which I cited, cautioned against the misuse of Article 356, noting that although the power is formally with the President, what we read in the book, what we find, that power is exercised by the President. But whether in true sense it is exercised by the President, it is effectively exercised by the councils of ministers and has the potential to undermine federalism and democracy. That's why sometimes the issue arises that our President of India is just a rubber stamp. The powers are utilized by the councils of ministers, not the President. Therefore, the material underlining the President's satisfaction must be carefully scrutinized. The court emphasized that Article 356 is an extraordinary power meant only for grave emergencies and cannot be evaluated by ordinarily administrative law standards. So the power is there, but it has to be exercised rarely in grave emergencies, not for fulfilling the interest of a political party. If synchronized elections become mandatory, will political pressure increase to maintain legislatures until the national cycle concludes? Will governors be compelled to postpone dissolutions to avoid disrupting synchronization? The risk of misuse, direct or indirect, cannot be ignored. Federalism is fragile, and any proposal that even inadvertently strengthens central control at the cost of state autonomy must be scrutinized with heightened vigilance. The amendment bill requires ratification by at least half of the state legislatures, as mandated by Article 3 at 68, for any alteration affecting the federal structure. This requirement is not a procedural formality, it is constitutional safeguard for the interest of the Constitution. It ensures that the voice of the state is not drowned by the majority in Parliament. A reform that affects state autonomy must be endorsed by states. The spirit of cooperative federalism demands nothing less. Merely because a political party is having majority in the Parliament, it is not open for it to change the basic structure of the Constitution by bringing any amendment. It had to shoulder the responsibility that constitutional safeguard is there. At this juncture, an equally significant dimensions must be explored, which is the philosophical meaning of elections. Elections are the mechanism through which the governed renew or withdraw their consent. This consent must be free, informed, and unencumbered by structural barriers. If elections are synchronized, the citizen is required to evaluate local and national leadership in a single moment. The voter's mind must compress two distinct evaluations. This compression may constrain the self-determination of the electorate. Democracy is not simply the act of voting, it is the quality of deliberation that precedes the vote. In this context, I must emphasize a principle articulated by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, that is constitutional morality. We all are aware that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was one of the chief makers of the Constitution. So he talked of the constitutional morality. He stated that constitutional morality means acting within the bounds of constitutional norms, even when political exigencies tempt us otherwise. This is what I was talking earlier. And this is what Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has emphasized, that merely a political party having majority in the Parliament is not free to change the basic structure of Constitution. It means honoring diversity rather than suppressing it. It means privileging the spirit of the Constitution over temporary political interest. As we contemplate synchronized elections, we must ask, does the proposal strengthen constitutional morality or does it challenge it? As we delve further, it becomes important to look beyond Indian constitutional practice and consider comparative experiences worldwide. Democracies everywhere have faced the challenge of synchronizing elections, balancing stability with accountability, and aligning federal aspirations with national unity. Yet, their solutions are shaped by unique political cultures, histories, and constitutional philosophies. Thus, Foreign models cannot simply be transplanted without assessing their suitability to our own context. This is very important. Only because Germany is having it, only because Spain is having it, we have to bring it to our country. That cannot be. We have to see that in present context, whether it will be feasible to introduce that pattern. Countries such as Germany, for instance, operate under a carefully structured parliament system that incorporates the constructive vote of no confidence. This mechanism ensures that instability does not lead to abrupt dissolutions. But Germany is relatively a smaller federation. Spain too uses a constructive no confidence motion, but Spain autonomy model, though decentralized, operates within a uniform pauses in governmental decision making. Yet, it must be understood that the Model Code of Conduct restricts only policy announcements that may unduly influence voters, not the routine functioning of the government. Essential services, welfare distribution, administrative decision, and ongoing projects continue uninterrupted. The true question, therefore, is not whether governance halts, but whether governance should be expected to operate without periodic accountability to the electorate. Frequent elections are not merely a cost. The other issue is whether financial burden. It is not merely a cost, they are check on power. They remind governments that the people are watching, evaluating, and free to respond. If elections are synchronized, accountability becomes periodic rather than continuous. A government that loses popular confidence early in the term may find itself insulated until the next synchronized cycle. This concern becomes particularly significant when we consider the interaction between synchronized elections and Article 356. If a state government collapses 3 years before the synchronized cycle, should the state continue under president rule until the national cycle catches up? Should it hold truncated elections? Should it install an alternative government without a fresh mandate? Each of these options carries constitutional implications. The 2024 Amendment Bill attempts to address this by providing that elections held after premature dissolution will fill only the remainder of the synchronized term. But such a truncated terms may undermine long-term policy continuity. A government with a mandate of only 18 months may hesitate to undertake reforms requiring sustained political capital. Administrative reforms, economic initiatives, infrastructure projects, and institutional restructuring often require stability over extended periods. Shortened tenures may inadvertently incentivize short-term governance, categorize or populist policies rather than structural reforms. In a synchronized election model, campaign strategies would undergo dramatic transformation. National campaigns would dominate the electoral space. Large parties with centralized organizational machinery would possess inherent advantages. Smaller regional parties might struggle to maintain visibility against the overwhelming backdrop of national discourse. This raises an important constitutional question. What is that important constitutional question? Should structural electoral design disadvantage one category of political actor over another? The framers of the Constitution did not intend for the structure of election to determine political success. They intended that success emerge from the free choice of the electorate, uninfluenced by structural biases. The role of Election Commission of India also acquires unprecedented significance. The Commission would need to ensure that political actors do not exploit logistical bottlenecks. It would have to prepare for contingencies such as natural disasters, security threats, or administrative disruptions that could render synchronized polling impossible in certain regions. Another aspect requiring reflection is the increased risks of electoral interference or misinformation campaigns when elections are synchronized. In an era where communication networks can be weaponized to spread misinformation, synchronized elections create a single moment of vulnerability. Any reform must therefore consider to birth security, media ethics, and digital literacy as central components of electoral integrity. At this point, it becomes necessary to turn once again to constitutional philosophy. Democracy does not exist solely in institutions. It exists in the habits of the people. It exists in their participation, their deliberation, their capacity to evaluate government at different levels. The Constitution reflects this through its commitment to decentralization. Panchayats, municipalities, state assemblies, and the parliament each embody levels of democratic engagement. Furthermore, synchronized elections may alter the internal functioning of political parties. Parties may prioritize national campaign themes and allocate resources accordingly. Candidates' elections may become centralized. Grassroots leaders who derive their legitimacy from local context may find themselves overshadowed. The internal democracy of political parties, a crucial but often overlooked pillar of constitutional democracy, may be affected by shifts in electoral strategy. We must also reflect on the constitutional symbolism of elections. Elections reaffirm that sovereignty rests with the people. Every electoral cycle renews this affirmation. When the cycles are decentralized, the affirmation is continuous. When cycles are unified, the affirmation becomes episodic. Whether democracy is better served by continuous reformation or periodic reformation is a question that merits philosophical consideration. Let us now consider the implication for marginalized communities. Elections offer platforms for their voices, grievances, and aspirations. Synchronized elections may compress the political space available for community-specific discourse. Regions with special need, such as tribal areas, border districts, remote rural belts, may lose visibility in the national electoral narrative. These are the greater issues which has to be decided, that it cannot be lost sight of. The Constitution demands that political structures amplify, not diminish, the voices of the marginalized. Their voices have to be raised. A further point arises for determination. Suppose a state or even multiple states face natural disasters or law and order crises during the synchronized cycle. Should election be postponed in these states? If they are postponed, should the entire nation election be rescheduled? In many states, what you find that natural calamities occur. कहीं पे बाढ़ है, कहीं पे भूकंप है, कहीं पे कुछ भी है. तो whether elections in those states should be stopped, or whether the elections in the nation should be halt, these are the issues to be decided, taking into interest the marginalized class, the habitats of those states. This reveals if only those states are delayed, the synchronized model collapses. This reveals a structural fragility. The framers of the Constitution designed electoral processes with resilience in mind. Flexibility is essential in a nation as large and complex as India. The amendment bill anticipates some of these issues and places significant reliance on Parliament to frame laws under the revised Article 327. If synchronization requires rigid structures that compromise federal autonomy or parliamentary responsibility, no legislation under Article 327 can cure that infirmity. Now, the judiciary. The judiciary too must be prepared for new categories of litigation. Questions may arise regarding the validity of truncated terms, the premature dissolution of legislatures, the constitutionality of corrective mechanism, and disputes over alignment procedures. Courts may be called to decide whether the synchronized model is being implemented in a manner consistent with the Constitution. So, courts have also a great role to play. It is duty of judiciary and the courts to look into these things. This will require nuanced judicial reasoning grounded in constitutional morality and the basic structure doctrine. In contemplating all these questions, we must recollect that the ultimate objective of electoral reform should be to deepen democracy, not to streamline it. Reform must empower the people, not silence complexity. Reform must enhance accountability, not dilute it. Reform must strengthen federalism, not centralize politics. Reform must preserve the spirit of Constitution, not compress it. It is in this spirit of careful balancing that we must now turn our attention to the ethical foundation of electoral democracy itself, to the philosophical meaning of federal autonomy, the jurisprudential position of the judiciary within a synchronized electoral framework, and the potential impact such a transformation may have on the very process of constitutional amendment. They further require us to reflect on the implication for union territories where constitutional asymmetry is both a feature and a necessity, and to consider the delicate interplay between the Election Commission and the executive, an interplay that must always be guided by constitutional morality and institutional restraint. At the heart of this entire discourse lies the foundational principle that ultimate sovereignty resides not in any branch of the state, but in the people themselves, whose voices, aspirations, and participations must remain the guiding force of every democratic reform. As this exploration deepens, it becomes increasingly important to move beyond the immediate structural and procedural dimension of the proposed, referred to as one nation, one election, and to engage with the deeper philosophical and normative foundation upon which our democratic edifice rests. For the Indian Constitution is far more than an institutional manual. It is at its heart a moral covenant, then embodies